I was talking to some friends just recently. Met them at an occasion, a gathering, and hadn't seen them for years. It's been, oh my gosh, probably at least 15 years since I've run into them, but it's been even more than that, 30 years since I've actually gotten together with them regularly. And they're listeners on the radio show, and if it's you that I'm talking about, hi, good to have run into you. But what I heard was this. I heard, well, we hear about your diet every week, and it's great and all that stuff. But what I really want to do is I want to do the whole diet thing naturally. I don't want to enter into an artificial program, with special foods and things like that. And you know what? I understand that. I really do. And I can identify with that a lot, because ideally changing the diet and having that all in place before you even start a program and just continuing that and seeing the weight come off, that would be a wonderful thing. The only problem with it is that it seldom works. And it's kind of like this. Yes. In fact, there's a movie that kind of reminds me of way back in the 60s. As a matter of fact, there was a movie called Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut translation from his book into a movie. And one of the main characters was the wife of a guy named Billy Pilgrim. And one of the lines that was repeated throughout the entire book, because when she started, she was absolutely gorgeous, and then she put on a lot of weight, and she kept saying to Billy, she said, Billy, I'm going to lose weight. I'm really going to lose weight. I really am. And all the way through the book, she was going to lose weight, and she ended up dying, of course, before she lost the weight. Now, that's kind of the situation a lot of people are in. Basically, all of this is happening, and also I'm going to lose weight. I really am going to lose it. And it just doesn't happen. And there's really great reasons why it doesn't happen. One of the reasons, the main reason, is that losing weight is an unnatural thing. It's not the kind of thing that just happens on a day-to-day basis when you're just doing things you're living. When you're eating any kind of carb load at all, it doesn't have to be very much, because whenever carbs of any sort, sugar, potatoes, anything that is considered a carbohydrate that has a glycemic index, namely puts sugar into your blood, your pancreas has no choice, if you're healthy, has no choice but to put out insulin. And when it puts out insulin, it literally locks the fat cells so they cannot release fat. It, by the way, opens the fat cells so they can store fat. It's kind of like this fat cell has two doors. It's got one door that if you've got any kind of sugar in your system and there's insulin as a result in your system, that in door to the fat cell swings wide open, and the out door to the fat cell slams tightly closed and cannot open as long as there is insulin in the system. So you've got to do something in order to bring the insulin down to a level where it's all being used to put the blood sugar into the cells, like the brain and the muscles, etc. And there's nothing left over to lock that outdoor on the fat cell. So it really kind of doesn't make sense, because almost everybody at almost every meal, even if they cut the amount of calories that they're eating per day, they are still eating enough carbs to lock those fat cells so they just don't want to release fat. Now, you can still lose weight, by the way, when you do that. No question about it. You can still lose weight, because if you're not eating quite enough carbs or sugars or starches to create sugars, you can actually burn muscle. You can turn muscle into sugar in order to meet your sugar needs. And unless you switch into fat burning mode and become fat adapted, as I call it, when you become fat adapted, then fat becomes your primary fuel. Now, that is something that requires something extraordinary. By the way, it is natural to go into that mode. Now, why do I say that? I just said that losing weight is not a natural thing. Your body doesn't want to lose weight. It wants to maintain your fat stores because it's saving them for a rainy day, for a famine or whatever. When our ancestors, of course, we're here actually because our ancestors had the capacity to store fat. If they hadn't, 6 months of no crops would have just wiped us all out off the face of the earth. So we're like little squirrels. We can store fat in order to make it through lean times, make it through the winter, right? And that's a wonderful thing. It's an absolutely magnificent thing, as a matter of fact. But the truth is that it's so important to have that fat for those times that it's very difficult to lose it. You've almost got to flip yourself into a time where you can burn the fat without bringing in the starches all the time. So what do? Well, it's perfectly natural to go into that fat adapted mode simply because, why? Our ancestors did it a lot. I mean, they didn't eat 3 big meals or, 7 big meals a day like we do here in this particular culture with the abundance that we're experiencing. I mean, thank God for abundance. But they didn't have those opportunities. They didn't have all the candies and sweets. The only reason you had candies and sweets were if you were royalty or you were a baron or you were a duke or something like that, and you had all these serfs working for you, and you could get some candied things from France and places like that, and therefore you were the only people in the whole society that were privileged with an opportunity to have gout. And there was a lot of gout in those people who had the money to do that, There was. So why would you want that opportunity? I understand. But still, that's the way we are universally now. We have the opportunity, all of us have the opportunity to have gout because of the overconsumption of jellies and fruits and all this high fructose corn syrup and Pepsi Cola and Mountain Dew and all this. I won't use the word that came to mind, but I think you can probably think of a whole bunch of them that would apply to this kind of stuff. Okay? In any case, what does it take to get into a fat adapted mode? You can't just do it naturally. I think that it would be wonderful if we could assume the diets that our ancestors had, 3 generations ago. Would it be healthy for us? Oh my God, it would be incredibly healthy for us if we had crops that were grown in soils that had not been milked dry, that had not been depleted by planting of the same crop over and over again, that it had been rotated, that we had pastured animals that were walking around on the ground all the time, and we could take the nutrition back in there through the manure spreading and things like that, although the smell was always pretty bad. But still, we could do that stuff and replenish the land and have those ancient farming techniques that help us grow nutritious crops, etc. And if we had been able to do that and continue that, then we would probably be a lot healthier than we are right now. But what is the situation? The situation is far from that. Now we've got glyphosate or Roundup being sprayed every year, and even on all of the wheat crops, a week before they're harvested, they're sprayed with glyphosate, sprayed with Roundup to kill the crop so that it's all uniformly dried out. So there's no wet spots, there's no green spots in the field. There's nothing that would prevent us from just running our machines through the fields on satellite-controlled networks, and all this stuff, and just like kind of sitting there eating your sandwich while you're riding the combine through the field because there's no green spots. That's kind of the way farming is done today. But what about the nutrition? What about the things that we need to build healthy bodies? What about the things that we need to build healthy feed animal bodies so that when we eat meat, we're getting all of the things we need from those animals? See, it's different. It's a much different world that we have today. And the possibility of actually eating naturally these days is extraordinarily low. You have to actually really put effort into it to eat organic and to eat things that aren't filled with pesticides and farming techniques that sap the nutrition out of the soil. Okay, so we were talking about the food supply and how that if you're going to be entering into a diet, it's really tough to eat naturally. I mean, do your best. If you can't afford organic, then get the good broccoli and the cauliflower and all that stuff that is in the non-organic section, and at least eat that. Don't fall into the habits of getting high-starch foods and that, because we've already said that closes off the ability to lose fat, but it doesn't close off the ability to burn muscle. And that's one thing that you just don't want to encourage anybody to do. Weight loss is not that important that you want to lose muscle, because that actually kills your health as opposed to enhancing your health. You want to lose fat. Okay, so now, what's the solution though? And this is the thing that people need to really know about, that it's natural to burn fat when you're in times of low carbohydrate eating. And this happened to our ancestors, saying that going into ketosis or going into fat burning mode, going into the mode where you don't have the carbs to supply your body with energy, and therefore you release fat, change that fat into fat fumes, into ketones, and those fat fumes dissolve in the blood, go throughout the body, and supply all the energy you need. As a matter of fact, people that are on ketones as opposed to carbs generally report that they have this kind of nice steady state of energy where they're not falling asleep in the afternoon. They're alert and awake all day long. Their memory is enhanced. They have kind of a euphoric feeling of, wow, things are nice, things are good. Even people who have been on antidepressants very often can get off their antidepressants during those times, and because they basically feel great. They feel optimistic about their life again, okay? So it's good to go into ketosis like that for many different reasons. But in any case, what we find is this, that when people go into ketosis and they're burning fat as their primary fuel, they stop craving sweets. They stop craving sugar. And this is absolutely revolutionary. I mean, this is a transcendent state, actually, where you can walk through the aisles of a grocery store and you look around and you say, nothing's calling my name. What's going on here? They always called my name. Oh my gosh, it was like that movie, that Eat Me, that big plant, that this is what's happening. They're disoriented at first. They come in and they are astonished. They come in and they always report it. They say, wow, I stayed at the outside rim of the grocery store for 2 weeks now, and I didn't even feel like going into the aisles that I'm normally in. I didn't buy any extra stuff in there just in case. I didn't do any of that stuff. What's going on? And we have to explain to them, of course, that what has happened is that their carb crashes have gone away. And this is something we've gone through several times. Carb crashes cause carb cravings. And what stimulates a carb crash? Carbs. You eat the carbs, your blood sugar skyrockets, your insulin therefore skyrockets to save your life so you don't get high blood sugar and die. It skyrockets to save your life, and then that crashes your blood sugar because you overdid the high blood sugar, the insulin overdid it to save your life, and that plummets you into the basement. So now you can't think, you can't remember even that you were on a diet, you can't do anything until you get carbs because your blood sugar has crashed, and now the only two things that can save you are adrenaline, which is the fight or flight hormone. Then you feel frantic, you feel all kinds of things, and depressed even, or you eat another carb, which skyrockets your blood sugar again. The insulin has to leap up to save your life. It slam dunks you back into the basement, and now you are craving again. And we call that the roller coaster. And that's something that can happen over and over and over again all day. I've told you about my ice cream addiction and how I did that for an entire summer, where I was on the roller coaster all day, every day. And frankly, I couldn't help it. I just craved the ice cream. I craved that sugar. But imagine a time when you don't have to crave that stuff, where it's not yelling out to you. It's not short-circuiting your memory. It's not short-circuiting your willpower. All of that stuff is intact. It was working extremely well. And you're just basically living your life. That's something that is revolutionary for most Americans these days. Because most Americans, 3/4 of Americans are actually 2/3 of Americans are either overweight or obese at this point. And they can't imagine going for more than an hour without popping something in their mouth. This is something that you've got to break it. You've got to break the cycle. Now, how easy is it to break the cycle? Pretty easy, but you've got to do it right. You can't do it just being around, or most people, I say, can't do it by just being around in a normal family environment or a normal food environment. Most people need to make a clean break from that area, from that environment, from that ambiance. They need to make a clean break. They need something that takes them away, that is a narrow prescribed treatment or protocol that takes their mind off of the foods that they have been addicted to for decades. It takes their mind off of it, and it puts them into a state of mind where they can do the transition fairly easily, and that is the ideal protein protocol. The reason it's so good is because the flavors that you're going to be experiencing while on the diet aren't that much different than the flavors you're experiencing. And if you have a sugar craving, you can eat one of our sweetened foods that aren't sweetened with sugar. They're not sweetened with calories. The sweetened food for a long enough time that you lose your sugar addiction. In fact, a lot of people still do the ideal proteins for snacks because they realize that they will be satisfied because the protein is what satisfies you. And in a normal diet, not the standard American diet as we know it now, but in a normal diet, the fat also is something that's going to lower your addiction to sugar. It's a satisfying thing for your body that limits the amount of hunger you're going to have in the next few minutes to an hour or so. So all of those things are involved in the ideal protein diet, and they are things that are going to help you make that transition from a superlative, put whatever word in there you want, diet, and then they're going to take you to a diet where you can actually control your urges and control your cravings, and a diet that is going to bring you through into a place where you can actually start thinking about food in a rational way.